So this T-shirt that I'm wearing is some Filmstruck swag because it's actually today's the last day, and I forgot that I was going to watch a noir film. So obviously, last night's Filmstruck film was not my final Filmstruck film. This Christopher Nolan film, how I'm going to end my time on Filmstruck. Um, I'm sad I couldn't get all of my Noirvembers from Filmstruck this year, but I tried. I'll have one more that's not Filmstruck tomorrow. This is obviously Christopher Nolan's very first film. It was released in 1998, and it's considered one of the greatest no budget films ever made. It was made for $6,000 roughly in 1998 money. It does not look like it was made for $6,000. Having seen short films made for that budget that look like crap, you can really see what a strong filmmaker Nolan was, technical filmmaker Nolan was from the get go with a film like this. He directed it, he produced it with his producing partner Emma Thomas, who has worked on all of his films with him. And anytime you talk about his work, you should definitely include her name because she has secured the bag for him so many times over the last 2 decades. It was written by Nolan. It was shot by him. He was the cinematographer. He assisted on the editing. The film was shot on 16 millimeter black and white film. It's told in a nonlinear way, much like Memento, far less confusing than Memento. It's more of a traditional noir sort of nonlinear in that you start with the protagonist and you hear how he wound up in the opening scene's situation as he tells his story. Although the story he tells you is also not in linear order. It's unveiled in a way to heighten the emotions of the story. So you get to know what you need to know because some of the things that happen later are more boring than some of the things that happened earlier, and so you have that rising tension. It's definitely a good calling card for what he would do later in his career, and a film that many writers could probably study to figure out how to have a very tight narrative because it's 70 minutes long and he pulls a lot in those 70 minutes. The only failing for me, and this is a failing in most of Nolan's films, I have not seen Interstellar, so I cannot comment on that one, but all the other ones I've seen, is he does not write women well. And they always feel, which is a shame because his producing partner is a woman. You'd think somehow she'd be able to be like, do it better. I never find his women very realistic. They always feel like cliches, varying cliches, but cliches. And this was no different. Although, to be honest, most of the characters in this film are cliches, but it works. Because they're more like archetypes than cliches, I guess. So the plot follows a man who is in his mid-20s and he wants to be a writer, but like many an aspiring writer, he's just more of a loafer. And he starts following people just for fun, for research. But he claims he's not as creepy as a man he meets who starts to burgle people. Because there's a fine line between, following people and being a creep, I guess, except you realize maybe not so much. He starts burgling people, and then he starts interacting with the people that he's burgled. This seems like enough twists, but there are more. I don't want to spoil them. But as the plot unravels, you go, oh yeah, there's so much going on that you don't know, that the protagonist doesn't know, that multiple characters don't know until the very end. And I'd have to think that some of this was inspired by Usual Suspects because there's a lot of similar sort of, like you see one thing, but actually three different things are happening, kind of unveiling in this film, very similar to what happens in The Usual Suspects. And the ending is very much similar to The Usual Suspects. But it has, noir tropes. He used natural lighting because he couldn't afford lighting equipment and actually makes the film feel more timeless almost because it doesn't ever feel too staged. It feels like he was in someone's apartment. but like the most HD you could see someone's apartment looking. And like the rattiness of some of the places looks more ratty because it's kind of dark and danky. Um, so I enjoyed it. I liked the performances. I wish the woman was a little more complex. Um, she's a good femme fatale, though. She's got a lot going, um, not under her psychological surface, but under the surface of what you think she's doing. Um, what else? What else? So this is available from Criterion. They released it along with his short film Doodlebug, and the restoration's gorgeous. It will make you want to pick up a camera and make something similar because um, he can do it, we can all do it, except that that's not true. You have to have talent in order to make something. When I went to art school the first time, I went twice, and I was a fashion design student the first time. And I had these drawings that I'd done in undergrad, and I showed them to the head of the fashion department. And he was like, I can see that you have talent, but you need to you have to know the rules before you can break the rules. And I feel like that's a step that a lot of people miss when they try to make films early on in their career is they think, well, if Nolan was able to do this with $6,000 and nothing professional, that I can do that too, Joe Schmo. But like Nolan knew how to make a film, and he knew how. You can see that in his big, budget films where he utilizes tons of money and can create technically masterful sequences. You have to know how to do all of that in order to execute on this sort of level. And I don't know that everyone who tries to make a $6,000 film does that. To that point, though, having seen this now and Memento, which I haven't seen in like a decade, but I remember really loving. And then most of Nolan's films after Memento have sort of left me cold, especially the Batman ones. I like some of the performances in The Dark Knight, but that's about it. And it just actively dislike some of his others. It makes me wish that he stuck to these sort of smaller scale stories because even though he can technically make these great films, there's something sharper about this one and Memento, in my opinion, that gets lost when he starts playing with all the big toys. That's my thought. Even though he picks great cinematographers and they shoot beautiful things. So this is my final film on Filmstruck. I am very sad, and I'm probably gonna spend the rest of December watching CW shows and catching up on a bunch of 2018 releases before the end of the year. And maybe I'll dive back into world cinema on my own in January. We'll see what happens. It's a sad day. I've really loved this service. I loved working for it. I still am at TCM. TCM and Filmstruck are one and the same, and it just feels like one of our vines have died on our grape tree. The grape trees. That was a bad metaphor. It's just sad. But as always, these films are literally iconic, and they will last forever. And film is forever as long as somebody keeps the camera negative. So keep your camera negatives. This is following the end of Filmstruck and my penultimate Noirvember film, and I'll try to be less sad. And just remember that films are great, and keep watching them and keep talking about them. And if you love something, let people know because, especially if it's a business, businesses can't thrive unless people know that they're beloved.